The China Study by Colin Campbell. Picture this. It's 1946, and you're 12 years old, standing in a sun-drenched barn on your family's dairy farm. The morning air smells like fresh hay and possibility. You've already been up for hours, milking cows alongside your father since before dawn, and your belly is full of the kind of breakfast that would make a nutritionist today either swoon or scream. Eggs, bacon, sausage, fried potatoes, all washed down with tall glasses of whole milk. Your father tears open a 50-pound sack of alfalfa seed, the tiny grains cascading onto the barn floor like a waterfall. He's mixing in this fine black powder, and he explains how it contains bacteria that'll help the alfalfa grow strong by converting nitrogen from the air into protein. That protein, he tells you, that's what makes the cows healthy. This was young Colin Campbell's world. A world where milk built strong bones, where meat and eggs were as American as apple pie, where the farm-to-table tradition meant health and prosperity. He carried these beliefs like a comfortable jacket into his scientific career, determined to prove that the American diet was humanity's crowning nutritional achievement. But here's the thing about truth. Sometimes it doesn't care what you believe. Fast forward 17 years. That same father, the one who taught him about protein in that golden-lit barn, has his first heart attack. By age 70, a second one kills him. And decades later, Dr. Campbell, now one of the world's leading nutritional scientists, would uncover a truth so powerful it could have saved his father's life. What you're about to hear isn't just another diet book summary. This is the story of how everything we've been told about healthy eating might be dangerously backwards. It's a journey that winds through malnourished Philippine villages, through decades of laboratory research that nobody wanted to believe, and culminates in the largest study of human nutrition ever conducted. The China Study has sold over 1 million copies and been translated into dozens of languages, not because it's trendy, but because it represents a seismic shift in how we understand food and health. The story behind it involves courage, scientific integrity, and the uncomfortable discovery that sometimes the most important truths are the ones we least want to hear. So let's dive in. To really grasp what Dr. Campbell discovered, you need to understand the world he came from, a world that basically worshipped protein. In the 1960s and 70s, the entire scientific community was obsessed with something called the protein gap. The idea was simple. Hunger and malnutrition in developing countries came from not enough protein. The solution? Ship more animal foods, milk, eggs, meat, to the world's poor. This noble mission took young Dr. Campbell to the Philippines, where he worked on a project to help malnourished children. The goal was straightforward: get these kids as much protein as possible. But then he noticed something that made absolutely no sense. The children getting liver cancer, a disease that usually shows up in adults, weren't the poorest, most malnourished kids. They were the children from the wealthiest families, the ones eating the highest protein diets, the ones whose meals most resembled the American diet everyone was trying to promote. How could this be? It went against everything he'd learned, everything the scientific establishment believed. Suggesting that protein could be harmful was basically scientific heresy. This was his crossroads moment. Around the same time, he stumbled across a research paper from India, buried in an obscure medical journal. The study was elegantly simple, but its findings were explosive. Researchers took 2 groups of lab rats and exposed them both to aflatoxin, a potent cancer-causing chemical. Then they fed one group a diet with 20% protein, similar to what many Westerners eat. They fed the other group only 5% protein. The results were jaw-dropping. Every single rat on the 20% protein diet developed liver cancer. Every single rat on the 5% protein diet avoided it completely. 100 to 0. This wasn't a slight difference or a statistical trend. It was absolute. The finding suggested that nutrition could completely override the effects of a powerful carcinogen. Dr. Campbell was shaken to his core. He even mentioned the study to a distinguished colleague from MIT, one of the world's top nutrition and cancer experts. The response? Dismissive. They must have gotten the numbers on the animal cages reversed. There's no way a high-protein diet could increase cancer. But Campbell couldn't let it go. The observation in the Philippines and the Indian study were pointing to the same terrifying conclusion. He faced a choice: ignore this radical idea and have a safe, respectable career, or risk professional ridicule by investigating a question nobody wanted asked. He chose truth over comfort. He secured funding from the National Institutes of Health and launched a deep, multi-decade laboratory program. He knew his work had to be absolutely flawless, or it would be dismissed entirely. So what did he discover over the next 27 years of meticulously controlled research? He could literally turn cancer growth on and off like a light switch, simply by changing the amount of protein in the rats' diet. When rats ate a 20% protein diet, early cancer clusters grew and multiplied. When switched to 5% protein, cancer growth stopped. He could flip back and forth, 20% on, 5% off. It was reversible. Think about how revolutionary this is. We usually think of cancer as a one-way street. Once it starts, it just keeps going. But this research showed that, at least in early stages, cancer growth was controlled by nutrition. The seeds of cancer might be planted by chemicals or genes, but their growth could be controlled by what we eat. Here's where it gets even more controversial. What kind of protein was he using? Casein, the main protein in cow's milk, making up 87% of its protein content. The next obvious question: do all proteins behave this way? He tested plant proteins like wheat, gluten, and soy protein, using the same experiments. The results were astonishing. Plant proteins did not promote cancer growth, even at the higher 20% level. Let me say that again. 20% casein diet, cancer switched on. 20% wheat and soy protein, no cancer promotion. This wasn't just about protein anymore. It was about the type of protein. Casein, the celebrated protein of cow's milk, nature's most perfect food, was consistently and powerfully promoting cancer. Plant protein was not. Imagine how this felt for Dr. Campbell, a man raised on a dairy farm, taught that milk was essential for health. His own impeccable research was showing that milk's main protein was a potent cancer promoter. But experiments on rats, no matter how compelling, are still just rats. The ultimate question remained: do these principles apply to humans? Enter the China study. In the early 1980s, a senior Chinese scientist named Dr. Junshi Chen came to work in Campbell's lab at Cornell. He brought an extraordinary gift, a data set unlike anything else in the world. Back in the 1970s, China's premier, Zhou Enlai, was dying of cancer. He initiated a massive nationwide survey mapping death rates for 12 types of cancer across more than 400 Chinese counties, covering 880 million people. It was the most ambitious biomedical research project ever undertaken. The result was a stunning, color-coded atlas revealing something fascinating. Cancer was geographically localized. In some Chinese regions, certain cancers were incredibly common. In others, virtually non-existent. Rates for some cancers varied by more than 100-fold, from county to county. In the United States, cancer rates might vary by 2 or 3 times between regions, and that's considered significant. 100-fold difference? Unheard of. Here's the crucial part. About 87% of Chinese people belong to the same ethnic group, the Han people. The massive disease differences probably weren't genetic. They had to be environmental or lifestyle related. This was the perfect opportunity. Dr. Campbell, Dr. Chen, and researchers from Oxford launched what the New York Times called the Grand Prix of Epidemiology. They surveyed 6,500 adults and their families across 65 rural Chinese counties. Blood samples, urine samples, detailed questionnaires, food samples from local markets, 367 different variables in total. What made this study unique was the diet itself. Unlike America, where almost everyone eats lots of animal foods, rural Chinese people ate primarily plant-based diets. Only 10% of their protein came from animals, compared to 70% in America. Their total fat intake was less than half of ours. Their fiber intake was triple. Instead of comparing one high-risk Western diet to another, this study compared a very low-risk plant-based diet to an even lower-risk plant-based diet. It was a chance to see what happens to human health when animal foods aren't the centerpiece of meals. They ended up with over 8,000 statistically significant associations between diet, lifestyle, and disease. So what did this massive snapshot reveal? The findings were stunningly consistent. People who ate the most animal-based foods got the most chronic diseases. People who ate the most plant-based foods were healthiest and tended to avoid these diseases. This wasn't vague. It was a cascade of specific, powerful correlations. Take blood cholesterol. In America, we consider good cholesterol to be under 200 milligrams per deciliter. In rural China, the average was only 127. Their high levels were near our low levels. Some counties averaged as low as 94. They found a direct relationship. As blood cholesterol rose, even within this very low range, rates of Western diseases like heart disease, diabetes, and cancer also rose. What determined cholesterol levels? Exactly what the animal studies predicted. More animal protein, meat, and dairy meant higher cholesterol. More plant protein and fiber meant lower cholesterol. The effect was so strong that even small amounts of animal food were associated with adverse effects. Then, cancer. Remember the lab studies showing casein promoted liver cancer? In China, they found the primary liver cancer risk factor was hepatitis B virus infection. But the virus didn't act alone. Cancer was far more prevalent in areas where people also had higher blood cholesterol, which was linked to eating more animal foods. It was a perfect fit with the animal studies. The virus was the gun. The animal-based diet was pulling the trigger. They saw similar patterns for other diseases. For breast cancer, women eating more Western-style diets, higher in animal foods and fat, had higher circulating estrogen levels. They started menstruating earlier and entered menopause later. This longer reproductive life, combined with higher hormone levels, meant greater lifetime estrogen exposure, a major breast cancer risk factor. Chinese women on traditional plant-based diets had only 35 to 40% of the lifetime estrogen exposure of Western women. Their breast cancer rates were only 1/5 of ours. This theme repeated for heart disease, diabetes, and several cancer types. These diseases clustered in the same areas and were consistently associated with eating more animal foods and fewer whole plant foods. The China study bridged the hard science of the laboratory with the lived experience of millions. It showed that principles discovered with rats and casein weren't just scientific curiosities. They reflected a fundamental truth about food and human health. The conclusion from this lifetime of research is both simple and profound. The diet that consistently promotes health and prevents, even reverses disease is a whole foods, plant-based diet. This means a diet centered on whole, unrefined plants, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, It means minimizing or eliminating animal products, meat, fish, dairy, eggs, as well as processed foods and refined carbohydrates. This single dietary pattern connected to lower rates of virtually every chronic disease studied. But here's the huge, obvious question. If the evidence is so clear and the benefits so profound, why haven't you heard this before? Why do your doctor, the government, and the media seem to tell you something completely different? This is where Dr. Campbell's story moves from the laboratory into the murky worlds of science, industry, and politics. What he found there is, in many ways, more shocking than his scientific discoveries. He learned the system isn't designed to promote health, it's designed to promote profit. He describes a system where government, science, medicine, industry, and media are intertwined in ways that promote profits over health, technology over food, confusion over clarity. He tells of serving on a prestigious National Academy of Sciences committee in 1982 that produced a landmark report called Diet, Nutrition, and Cancer. The report cautiously recommended Americans eat more fruits, vegetables, and whole grains, and less fat. A moderate message, but all hell broke loose. The meat, dairy, and egg industries attacked in full force. Industry lobbying groups produced their own reports, filled with hand-picked experts, and delivered them to every member of Congress. The message was clear. Don't mess with the American diet. Campbell even found himself on a secret industry-funded committee of scientists. He dubbed it the Airport Club, whose sole purpose was monitoring research that might harm meat and dairy industries. He discovered he was one of their primary targets. The problem isn't necessarily illegal. It's not about scientists faking data. It's far more subtle and, in many ways, more dangerous. It's about what gets funded. The National Institutes of Health has 27 different institutes and centers. Not one is dedicated to nutrition. Research money flows toward patentable drugs and surgical devices, not toward studying the power of simple food. It's about what gets taught. Most doctors receive virtually no nutrition education in medical school. The little they do get is often funded and shaped by food and drug industries. No surprise your doctor is more likely to prescribe a cholesterol pill than prescribe a diet that would work more effectively without side effects. It's about what the public is told. The dairy industry spends hundreds of millions on marketing, much disguised as nutrition education funneled directly into schools. Children learn from an early age that milk builds strong bones, a message that's, at best, a gross oversimplification, and, at worst, dangerously misleading given evidence linking dairy to osteoporosis and other diseases. The system is self-perpetuating. Scientists studying individual nutrients out of context, what Campbell calls reductionism, are more likely to get funding. This research, like studying isolated lycopene from tomatoes, is easily co-opted by industry. You can't patent a tomato, but you can patent a lycopene pill. This reductionist science creates a constant stream of confusing, contradictory headlines. Eggs are bad, then they're good. Fat is the enemy, then it's carbohydrates. This confusion serves a purpose. It makes people feel nutrition is too complicated to understand, so they give up and keep eating what they've always eaten. That's exactly what industries profiting from the status quo want. Campbell shares stories of two courageous doctors, Caldwell Esselstyn and Dean Ornish, who put these principles into practice. They took patients with advanced, severe heart disease, people told their only options were bypass surgery or death, and put them on strict whole foods, plant-based diets. The results? They achieved the most significant reversal of heart disease ever documented in medical history. They showed the human body has incredible capacity to heal itself if we just stop poisoning it with the wrong foods. Were these doctors celebrated as heroes by the medical establishment? Were their methods adopted by hospitals nationwide? No. They were marginalized, ignored, sometimes ridiculed. Dr. Esselstyn, a top surgeon at the prestigious Cleveland Clinic, was nicknamed Dr. Sprouts behind his back. Both he and Dr. John McDougall, another pioneering physician, found themselves pushed out of the very institutions that should champion their life-saving work. Why? Because what they offer is too simple, too cheap, and puts power back in the patient's hands. There's no money in Brussels sprouts and broccoli. No fancy technology, no expensive drugs, no recurring surgical fees. Just health. And health, unfortunately, isn't a very good business model. So where does this leave us? It leaves us with a choice. We can remain confused, caught in the crossfire of marketing and misinformation, continuing down a path leading to sickness and disease. Or we can listen to the overwhelming evidence. We can adopt a way of eating that's been shown, time and again, to be the single most powerful tool we have to protect our health. Dr. Campbell doesn't present this as complicated rules. He boils it down to simple principles. Think of nutrition as a holistic system. The thousands of chemicals in an apple work together in a symphony that can't be replicated by a vitamin pill. That's why supplements aren't a cure-all. The magic is in whole food. There are virtually no nutrients in animal foods that aren't better provided by plants. Animal foods have more cholesterol, more fat, and a type of protein that acts very differently in the body, while lacking fiber and antioxidants. Genes aren't destiny. They're like seeds. Nutrition is the soil, water, and sunlight determining which seeds grow. We control which genes get expressed. The same nutrition that prevents disease in early stages can halt or reverse it in later stages. It's never too late to start. The message of the China study is ultimately one of hope and empowerment. It tells us we're not helpless victims of our genes, or a medical system that often seems more interested in treating symptoms than creating health. The power to live a long, healthy life is, to a large extent, in our own hands. It starts with what we put on our plate. It starts with a simple, courageous choice to eat more plants. When you step back and look at the entire story, from that quiet dairy farm in 1946 to modern medicine's halls, it's a powerful reminder of how easily we can lose our way. We've become a society that trusts technology more than nature, a pill more than a plate of food. We've been taught to look for complicated solutions to problems with very simple origins. Dr. Campbell's journey is a call to return to simpler wisdom. It's wisdom that isn't new. It's been echoed by thinkers and healers for thousands of years, but now it's backed by an undeniable mountain of modern scientific evidence. So what can you take away today? I'm not giving you a complex meal plan. The beauty is its simplicity. Start by thinking about your next meal. Could you add more whole plants? Instead of fries, maybe steamed broccoli or a large salad. Instead of a burger, maybe hearty lentil soup or a black bean burger. The goal isn't perfection, especially at first. The goal is direction. Every step toward a more plant-based diet is a step toward greater health. Dr. Campbell suggests a 1-month trial, just 1 month eating whole foods, plant-based. Not to reap all the long-term benefits, but to prove to yourself one simple thing. You can do it. You'll discover new foods, likely feel better, and realize what seems radical is actually achievable. This book is more than research summary. It's a manifesto for a quiet revolution happening not in the streets, but in our kitchens. A revolution against a system that profits from our sickness, and a reclaiming of power to create our own health. The choice, as always, is yours. But knowing what you know now It's a choice you can make with clarity and confidence. That was the story behind the China study by Colin Campbell. We've journeyed through the main landscapes of this incredible book today, but a summary is really just a map of a beautiful country. Reading the book yourself is like taking the journey. It's in the quiet reading moments, when a particular story or simple phrase hits you unexpectedly, that real transformation happens. This summary is here to help you decide if this is a journey you want to take. If anything we've talked about today sparked something in you, I encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning information. It's an experience that can genuinely change how you see your plate, your health, and your future. There's a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this summary valuable and want to keep exploring ideas that shape the world's most successful people, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It helps us reach more curious minds like yours and ensures you won't miss our next journey into another life-changing book. Let's keep growing together.